Welcome to the Keep Up channel. Our episode today is about Lita Ford. When we talk about the pantheon of rock and metal gods, we usually picture a very specific demographic, usually guys with long hair in the 70s. But then there's Lita Ford. She feels, I don't know, inevitable now, like a fixture of the genre. But the more I looked into the sources for this deep dive, the more I realized her position wasn't guaranteed at all. We are talking about a British-born, American-raised guitarist who went from being a teenage prodigy to a glam metal icon. And she did it while navigating an industry that was, frankly, hostile to her existence for a long time.
It is a fascinating trajectory, and survivor is definitely the right word. But if we look at the mission of today's discussion, we need to go beyond just the biography. We need to look at the mechanics of her career. We're exploring the evolution of a female lead guitarist in a male-dominated ecosystem, specifically how she bridged that gap between 70s hard rock and 80s metal. And we need to unpack the musical choices and personal battles that, define that sound. There are some heavy themes here. The friction between punk and metal, the fight for creative control, and resilience against some truly traumatic personal situation.
So let's start at the beginning. Lita Rosanna Ford. Born in London, 1958, British father, Italian mother. But she didn't stay in the UK long. The family moved to the US when she was 4, eventually landing in Long Beach, California. So she has that classic Southern California kind of sun-soaked upbringing, but with European roots.
And that geography is crucial. Long Beach in the late 60s and 70s was a melting pot of musical styles. But what really stands out in the research is her specific inspiration. She wasn't, trying to be a folk singer or a pop star. She was listening to Deep Purple. Her idol was Ritchie Blackmore. She picked up the guitar at age 11. And she didn't just want to strum chords to accompany her voice. She wanted to play lead.
That's a key distinction. A lot of artists use the guitar as a songwriting tool, but she was training to be a shredder.
Exactly. She is a mezzo-soprano, so she has a strong vocal range, but her primary identity was forged through the fretboard. She was learning complex scales and aggressive picking techniques at a time when girls were generally encouraged to play, acoustic or piano.
And clearly the practice paid off, because at 16, an age where I was barely trusted to drive a car, she gets recruited. And not just for a garage band. She gets picked up by Kim Fowley, who is this legendary, albeit incredibly controversial impresario. He's putting together the Runaways. This is 1975.
The Runaways are pivotal. Fowley manufactured the band, yes, but the talent was real. They secured a recording contract almost immediately and started touring in the late 70s. But here's where we need to look at the musical dynamics. Lita's lead guitar was integral to their sound, but it was also the source of the band's eventual destruction.
Right, because usually when we hear about bands breaking up, we hear creative differences, which is often just code for we hate each other.
Yeah.
But in the Runaways, it seems like there was an actual genre war happening inside the group.
That is the perfect way to describe it. It was a genre war. By 1977, the band had parted ways with Fowley and lead singer Cherie Currie. So the power dynamic shifted to Joan Jett and Lita Ford. Joan Jett was looking at the musical landscape and seeing the rise of punk. She wanted to move toward a Ramones-influenced sound fast, 3 chords, raw energy, no solos.
Which makes sense for Joan Jett, considering her later career. But Lita...
Lita hated it. She and the drummer, Sandy West, were hard rock and heavy metal loyalists. They worshipped bands like Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath. Metal is about technical proficiency, extended solos, and complexity. Punk is often about the rejection of that complexity. So you have Jett wanting to strip the music down and Ford wanting to build it up. It wasn't just an argument, it was a fundamental incompatibility in musical philosophy.
It's interesting because in hindsight, both genres exploded, but they couldn't exist in the same band. And on top of that, Ford writes in her memoir, Living Like a Runaway, that she felt socially isolated too. She mentioned feeling uncomfortable with the band's internal dynamics, specifically regarding sexuality. She noted that the other members were exploring relationships with women, and she just felt like the odd one out.
It adds a layer of personal alienation to the professional disagreement, and we can't ignore the management aspect. The documentary Edgeplay and Ford's own accounts paint a picture of a toxic environment under Kim Fowley allegations of verbal and sexual abuse. So when the band finally splits in April 1979, it's not just a career change for Ford, it's an escape.
So she escapes the wreckage of the Runaways. It's 1980, the 80s are starting. You'd think she's Lita Ford, she's in a huge band, the solo career will be easy. But looking at the timeline, there's this massive gap before she actually hits it big. What was happening there?
Well, ask yourself this. Was there a precedent for a solo female guitar hero in 1980?
I mean, Heart. But that was a band.
Exactly. There wasn't really a template for a woman standing center stage, shredding solos, and fronting a metal band as a solo artist. The industry didn't know what to do with her. She signed with Mercury Records in 1982, but her debut Out for Blood in 1983 was a commercial disappointment. Then Dancing on the Edge in 1984 did okay, Fire in My Heart charted internationally. But she wasn't a superstar. She was grinding, but the formula wasn't clicking.
This brings us to 1988, the breakthrough. She signs with RCA and hires Sharon Osbourne Management. Now, fans often talk about this era as her selling out or going pop. But what actually changed musically? Because she was still playing guitar, right?
Yeah. She was, but the structure changed entirely. This was the genius of Sharon Osbourne's management and the production of that era. They took Lita's technical ability and packaged it into radio-friendly pop metal. If you listen to the album Lita, the songs follow a very specific verse-chorus-verse structure with massive anthemic hooks.
So less jamming, more sing-alongs.
Precisely. Take Kiss Me Deadly. The riff is catchy, not overly complex. The production is polished, big drums, layered vocals. It fits perfectly between Bon Jovi and Def Leppard. She simplified the shredding to serve the song, rather than making the song a vehicle for the shredding.
And it worked. Kiss Me Deadly is everywhere. But the real monster was Close My Eyes Forever, the duet with Ozzy Osbourne.
A top 10 hit, number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100. And that song is interesting because it showed her vocal capability. Standing toe-to-toe with the Prince of Darkness is no small feat. It cemented her status not just as a guitarist, but as a legitimate mainstream rock star.
But isn't there a risk there? When you polish the sound that much, do you lose the die-hard metalheads?
You do risk that. But in 1988, glam metal was the mainstream. The lines were blurred. However, the problem with chasing a trend is that trends die. She followed up with Stiletto in 1990 and Dangerous Curves in 1991. They were good albums. Shot of Poison is a great track, but the numbers dropped. And we all know what happened to rock music in 1991, 1992.
Grunge, Nirvana, Pearl Jam. Suddenly, big hair and power ballads were uncool.
Overnight. So she hit a plateau professionally right as the cultural tide went out.
And while her career is hitting this wall, her personal life is, well, chaotic. She had these high-profile relationships. She was engaged to Tony Iommi of Black Sabbath. Now, Iommi is a legend, the riff master. You'd think that'd be a power couple.
Musically, perhaps. They even worked on an unreleased album called The Bride Wore Black. But personally, according to Ford's memoir, it was a nightmare. She alleges severe physical abuse during that relationship. It paints a very dark picture of what was happening behind the scenes of these rock romances.
Then she marries Chris Holmes from WASP, which ended quickly. But the big shift happens in 1994. She meets Jim Gillette from the band Nitro.
And this is where the story takes a sharp left turn. They married after knowing each other for 2 weeks.
2 weeks. I take longer to decide on a pair of shoes.
It was impulsive, and it led to what fans call the lost years. They had 2 sons, James and Rocco, and they decided to completely exit the music industry. They moved to Turks and Caicos, an island in the Caribbean. Gillette started a construction and real estate business. Lita became a full-time mom, homeschooling the kids.
It's actually kind of wild to think about. The queen of metal, who was just on MTV with Ozzy, is now on an island, totally disconnected from the music world. No touring, no recording, for over a decade.
Silence. She didn't release new material from 1995 until 2009. That is a lifetime in the music industry. You are effectively forgotten.
So when she finally decides to come back in 2009, the anticipation must have been huge. But the result? Wicked Wonderland. I've listened to this album, and I have to ask, what on earth happened here?
This is a critical cautionary tale. Wicked Wonderland was released in October 2009, but it just didn't sound like Lita Ford. It sounded like a new metal experiment.
For listeners who might not know the distinction, how are we defining new metal here? And why is it so bad for Lita?
Well, new metal think bands like Korn or early Disturbed is characterized by down-tuned guitars, heavy rhythmic grooves, often hip-hop influenced beats, and usually a lack of guitar solos. It's very angsty and rhythmic. Lita Ford's style is built on classic rock roots, soaring vocals, and melodic, high-pitched guitar solos. Wicked Wonderland was heavy, industrial, and very collaborative with her husband, Jim Gillette.
It felt like she was trying to wear a costume that didn't fit.
She later admitted exactly that. She has this quote where she said she wasn't going to come out in sandals with hairy armpits, meaning she wanted to be modern, but she realized fans wanted a real Lita Ford album, and this wasn't it. It was disjointed. It felt like she was trying to sound like it was popular in the early 2000s rather than being herself.
And the backdrop to this musical misfire was the collapse of her marriage. Around 2011, Things with Gillette fell apart. And fell apart is putting it lightly. They were in talks for a reality show called The Gillettes, an extreme American family.
Which, thankfully, never happened, because the reality was grim. Ford claimed that when she went to LA to discuss the show, she came back to find her husband and sons had turned against her. She alleges that Gillette used parental alienation tactics, convincing the children that she was the enemy, that she was going to harm them. She described a situation where she feared for her physical safety from her own family.
Parental alienation is such a heavy concept. It's not just dad said mean things about mom. It's a systematic psychological manipulation to erase the other parent from the child's life.
Exactly. Gillette denied the claims and has full custody. But for Lita, the result was losing contact with her children. That is a profound trauma. But in true artist fashion, that trauma became the fuel for her actual comeback.
This is the redemption arc, 2012. She releases Living Like a Runaway.
This is the album Wicked Wonderland should have been, released on SPV Steamhammer. The title itself is a declaration of independence. She had made peace with her runaway's past, and musically she went back to her roots. No more down-tuned nu metal. This was classic hard rock.
It felt authentic. It felt like she was finally driving the car again. And speaking of authenticity, we have to talk about Time Capsule in 2016. This story blows my mind. She literally found tapes in a closet.
Yes, this is a dream for any music nerd. She found old 24-track analog tapes in her house from the 80s. These weren't digital files. These were heavy physical reels that had somehow survived the island humidity.
And the guest list on these tapes is insane. It wasn't just her jamming alone.
No, it was a snapshot of the 80s rock elite. You have Gene Simmons from Kiss playing bass on a track. You have Dave Navarro on mandolin. Robin Zander from Cheap Trick providing backing vocals. These were recordings made when everyone was just hanging out, having a good time without the pressure of label.
Why do you think she released them in 2016? Was it just nostalgia?
I think it was about legacy. By releasing Time Capsule right after her comeback, she bridged the gap. She showed the continuity between the Lita of the 80s and the Lita of today. It reminded everyone, hey, I was there with Gene Simmons. I was part of that scene.
We've talked a lot about the drama in the songs, but I want to pivot to the gear. Because Lita is a gearhead. She's not just holding the guitar as a prop. You mentioned she launched Lita Ford guitars in 2017. What makes her setup unique?
It's very specific to her aggressive playing style. For years, she was synonymous with the BC Rich Warlock.
That's the guitar that looks like a weapon, right? All the jagged edges.
That's the one. It screams metal. But it's not just cosmetic. The shape allows for easy access to the highest frets for soloing. And technically, she favors very high output electronics.
Okay, explain that for the non-musicians. Why high output?
High output pickups send a stronger signal to the amplifier. This pushes the amp into distortion much earlier and harder. It gives you that thick, sustaining, crunchy sound that is the hallmark of 80s metal. You don't have to fight the guitar to get the tone. The guitar drives the amp. Her signature models with Jim Cara are built to replicate that specific hot-rodded 80s tone, but with modern stability.
And she does this thing called the Rockstar Experience, where fans can buy a guitar and hang out.
It's a brilliant move. A fan buys the custom instrument, but they also get to come backstage, meet her, and see the rig. It breaks down that barrier between the rock god and the fan, validating her as a working musician who loves her tools.
It seems like she's finally in a place where she's getting her flowers. Guitar Player magazine gave her the Certified Legend Award. She's touring with a solid band. She's written the memoir.
She has reclaimed her narrative. And if we zoom out, that's the real story here. Lita Ford bridged the gap between the raw rebellion of the 70s and the commercial polish of the 80s. She survived the implosion of the Runaways, she survived abuse allegations, she survived a career-killing hiatus, and she survived the loss of her family.
It really makes you think about the concept of staying power. We see so many artists from that era who tried to chase trends like bands doing grunge albums in '94 or nu metal in '99, and it usually ended their careers. Lita tried it once, hated it, and corrected course. It just raises the question, how many careers were ruined because artists stopped trusting their own instincts? Lita had to go back to her roots, back to the heavy melodic rock she fought for in the Runaways, to finally find peace.
It's the ultimate lesson in artistry. Authenticity isn't just a buzzword, it's a survival strategy.
A survival strategy indeed. What a journey for the Queen of Metal. Our episode today has ended. Thank you for watching, and see you in another video.